thank you guys for coming today. You guys may or may not know, I am also, I teach music supervision at USC, and I've been teaching for a while, for the past 10 years. But something I always like to tell my students is that, if you're interested in music supervision, there's a whole world of people involved in placing music in all kinds of media. It's not just film and TV, and it's not just independent music supervisors. So that's what today's panel is about. We're going to introduce you to all the people, a handful of people in our community. If anyone has been to the Guild of Music Supervisors Awards, you know that it's not just music supervisors. There's a whole awesome, amazing community of people who love music and want to help it get placed in media and support artists. So just to paint a little picture, right? I'm an independent music supervisor, mostly in film and TV, and I help suggest songs and then help license them. So when I'm looking for music for a scene, I'm talking to creative departments at labels, publishers, third-party pitching companies who represent indie artists, and music libraries. So we have Robyn Booker from Warner Records, who's going to talk about that. Tarik Bradford, who is a third-party pitcher, who's going to talk about that, and Jonathan Lane from 5 Alarm Music, which is a music library. And then obviously once we pick a song we want to use, I need to clear it. So representing clearance for publishing is Allegra Willis-Nur, who from BMG, who's with us here today. And then once you have your song in your TV show, it airs, well, it goes on TV, someone needs to promote it, someone needs to make a trailer for your film. So Danny Exum's here to talk about music supervision for trailers. You're going to see music in ads. Maya Halfon Cordova is going to talk about music supervising for ads and how it's different from film and TV. And then, that's Lila Obregon Wilson. And then Maya will talk to us a little bit about music supervision in games, video games. So I'm going to let each person kind of introduce and talk a little bit about what they do, here, I'll run down the questions. What your job entails, what you love about it, what experience prepared you for the job, and what strengths someone in your position needs. So I'm going to start with Robyn Booker. Will you tell us a little bit about working on the creative side of a record label?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Robyn. I'm originally from Alabama, and I got my start 18 years ago. Sorry, I'm going to include a little bit of my origin story, Lindsay. And I sort of I got a degree in communications, and I got an internship with a couple people. And then I worked at a composer agency. I worked at 2 film studios in the music department. I worked at publishers. I worked at a trailer house as a music supervisor. I've sort of bounced around a lot of different places, and which led me to Warner Records. And I've been there for almost, 3.5 years. And my job entails placing the Warner Records frontline catalog, which just means their current music, into film, TV, trailers, and promos. And what I love about my job is getting the placement, like actually seeing the work that you put in pay off. There really isn't anything like it. And I call it lightning in a bottle, or witnessing a miracle, because, there's basically, millions and millions of songs out there. And for your song to be chosen for a specific scene or use is a pretty big deal. And it's not easy to do. What were the other questions?
What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? How are you getting the placement?
Well, I'm doing a lot of proactive reach out to a lot of my clients that are music supervisors, or producers, creative directors, and like promo departments. Basically anyone that touches music on a project, I want to be talking to them. And then a lot of it is reactive, meaning I get a lot of emails from supervisors on creative people that are asking for specific songs, or, they need to feel specific. There's a prom scene, there's a slow dance, it needs to be, but it's not a romantic song, it's platonic. So it can't be about romantic love. It needs to be about platonic love. So my job is to go and find that perfect song for the scene, and help the clearance process through the whole process, not just pitch. That doesn't just end at pitching the song. Then when they come with the request, I want to be able to see the whole thing through so that it gets used. And yeah, that's sort of it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And what do you think are some good qualities to have in your position? And are there any experiences that you've found have been helpful in your role?
I mean, I've been lucky, and I did not mean for my career to go be bouncing around a bunch of places, but I actually have found it to be very valuable. I'm pretty adaptable at this point. And honestly, it really does. Over the years, I've made so many great contacts and connections that it really is about the relationships that you make. So I think having those relationships and maintaining those relationships has really, really helped me in my career. I think it's helped me build a good reputation that I don't, take lightly. So yeah, I use my relationship building as a good quality.
And when you're hiring someone, what qualities are you looking for in someone who can be on your team?
I mean, someone who is proactive, who says is a yes person, who sort of dives in, and likes to do a lot of research and likes to learn, and is passionate about this industry specifically. I've interviewed people, and it's like, well, and they say, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know. I might want to go into A&R. I might want to do this. I might want to do that. That's the wrong approach. You gotta know, if you're interviewing for a sync position, create a sync position. That's, even if it's not necessarily, you may not know that it's the path that you want to take. Like, that's what I need to hear. I need to hear you say, I am passionate about the film and TV industry or whatever. So whatever you're interviewing for, that passion needs to come across.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next in the hot seat, Tarik Bradford, who runs his own pitching company called Dahomey Music. Tell us about what you do as a third-party pitcher. What does that job entail, and what do you love about the job, and what strengths do you bring to the job?
Yeah, so my job is similar to what Robyn does, only I represent artists who aren't signed to a major label. So I have clients who are independent label, we're signed with an independent label that may not have an in-house person to pitch their music, or they don't have any label or publishing deal at all. So I have a variety of clients, some who are completely independent, some who are with smaller labels or smaller publishers, and I represent them for film, TV, commercials, video games. I'm just trying to get their music placed in all of those spots, and hopefully shine a light on what they're doing with their career, because some of them are up and coming, some are a little more established. So I have a mixture of artists who are household names, who are known and recognizable, and a lot of artists who are completely new and up and coming. So it's a mixture of different styles and places that people are in their career. So what I do is just try to get them to people like yourself and other supervisors who are looking for songs, looking for artists to hopefully get their music placed in each of those mediums. And so similar to Robyn, is as far as that, it's just I don't have one specific roster that I work with. I go out and look for artists to represent and catalogs to represent. And just a little background, I came from the major labels and major publishing. I used to work at Warner for 8 years, and EMI for a couple of years, Virgin and Universal. So I made my rounds in the major label world and the major publishing world, as well as some studio time and some management companies before I started my own company about 9 years ago.
And do you represent one-stop artists?
Yes, I represent a lot of artists who are one-stop, especially artists who are new and coming up. That's one of the things that I try to stress to the artists that I'm working with is, for people who don't know, one-stop, it means that you control both the publishing 100% and the master 100%, that there's no other company that you need to go to. So a lot of, I deal with a lot of hip hop that I work with that's up and coming. I try to get it to be one stop, which anybody who's familiar with dealing with hip hop knows that's not always easy. And so even if it's sometimes not one stop, I try to make sure that it's as easy as possible to clear. And so sometimes it's difficult when you have bigger artists who have big features, but when it's up and coming artists that don't have household names and don't have songs that are recognizable, I try to impress upon them how important it is to have one-stop material to go out to pitch, because it gives them a much better opportunity to get their music placed.
Do you think you'd be able to run your own company if you hadn't worked at a major label and publisher and had all that background?
My ego says yes, but the reality says it would be a lot harder. Like, it was totally, I worked in those companies for almost 18 years, and the experience that I got there was invaluable, and the connections that I made. And so when I started out my own company, reaching out to people already knew me for having worked with me for 15, 17 years. So I couldn't have just got that from nowhere. I came into the industry on my own. I grew up here in the LA area. I went to college, Cal State LA, and I just started interning and making my way up. So and for me, it was invaluable because I didn't have a family member in the industry. I didn't have any connection to the industry. Despite being in LA, people assume that everybody in LA has a connection, but like, my dad was a truck driver. So for me, I had to start out just wherever I could get in. Management companies, I interned at Paramount, at Virgin, at any place that it would let me come in while I was in college. I interned there. I did college radio. I did a little bit of everything just to kind of get my foot in the door. And like a lot of people, I didn't know much about the industry. I knew, the sexy jobs that everybody knows, A&R and marketing and owning a label. Those were the only things that I knew. So when I got in, I just took as much information that I could, and I added it to my resume. And, when I was at Virgin, I was in the urban promotions department. And we had a lot of huge artists like Janet Jackson and Scarface. And then once at that time, the labels were consolidating and a lot of people were looking for jobs, and everybody was looking for jobs in the same areas. And I thought, I better pick up a skill that not everybody knows. And at that time, this is over 20 years ago, 22 years ago, Synch wasn't as sexy as it is today. Nobody really cared. It was kind of the cherry on top because everybody was selling records. But I figured, hey, learning licensing and learning basic things is something that I can transfer to anything. So I started out in 1999, 2000, doing licensing and clearance at Warner Music Group for everything from greeting cards to singing toothbrushes, compilations. And then I also did sample clearance there for 6 years. So that also helped me. I did clearance long before I ever got into the world of pitching. And that's one of the things that I think was a big help for me, was I understood budgets, clearances, publishing, splits. I understood all of that before I ever stepped to what we call the creative side, which is reaching out to supervisors and sending them music. I knew, okay, I can't pitch Led Zeppelin for this $5,000 spot.
Thank you.
I can't, is a lot of people think what supervisors and what pitch people do is just, hey, find a cool song. But that's like the easiest thing to do. It's find the right song that can clear for the budget, that can clear in a timely manner, and that maybe you have a certain timeline of when a project airs. Maybe it's a 90s project. So paying attention to all the details is really important. And for me, having that clearance background of doing that for 6 years was really invaluable tool. When I stepped into the more creative side of things, I knew what not to pitch to people, which is a lot of times just as important as what you do pitch.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, that's pretty amazing. Any particular strengths that you felt have kept you in the game for so long and kept you afloat?
Thick skin and perseverance. It's I've been in the industry for close to 27 years now, so it's been a ton of changes. I've been with companies that have been bought, been sold, been laid off, had to restart my career, had to change careers, had to change, trajectories. So a lot of perseverance and kind of sticking with it and, kind of understanding that it's a business and it's not always about what you necessarily want. You kind of have to make things happen. And you also are most likely you're going to have to endure some ups and downs. And, the industry will test, kind of how bad you want it. So I think that's probably the biggest tool on a personal level, is to have like perseverance, and then on the business side to pay attention to detail. That's for me what Clarence really taught me, was something that you might think is not important. If you spell an artist's name wrong, their real name wrong, it can mess up everything. Now the cue sheet could be messed up. So little details and things that you kind of take for granted are really important. So I would say perseverance and paying close attention to detail, wherever you're working on, and paying attention when people are talking. If somebody gives you some information, take that information and try to actually respond to what they're asking for.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan Lane, would you please step up and tell us a little bit about music libraries and why they're needed and all the good things about them and what you do on a daily basis?
Totally. Hi, everyone. How's it going? My name's Jonathan Lane. I'm with 5 Alarm Music. So 5 Alarm is a music for media company. So it's music specifically created to be used in all forms of media. We represent about 80 different catalogs from around the world. And then we also produce our own in-house catalogs as well, with full-time composers that we have on staff. And very similar to Tarik and Robyn, we're a creative resource for all different kinds of productions across all different kinds of media, anything that you can think of. Largely, my role there sort of runs the gamut. So my time is sort of split between, forging relationships with music creatives, music supervisors, and similar, and as well as forging relationships and pitching music network executives and studio executives, and creating music partnerships with those people between 5 Alarm and the studios and the networks, so that we're able to sort of integrate and be a creative resource for their productions, like internally as well. And also we have an entire kind of custom music division as well, which is like another huge piece of the business. My time is split between sort of pitching those executive level kind of partnerships, the music supervisor pitching as well, forging those relationships and nurturing them. And then also sort of looking after a lot of the kind of like TV and film business strategy as a whole at 5 Alarm. Unfortunately, like, how are we making enough money? How do we make more? Like the stuff that like nobody really loves to have to associate with the world of music. But it's unfortunately one of the dirty truths of our industry, is that we actually need to make money. So I do a lot of that. I'll do a lot of that stuff too. So it's sort of like looking after financial goals and things like that, and making sure that we're achieving what we need to be achieving, trying to help keep the ship running, and all that fun stuff.
And do you feel like there's an experience or job you had that prepared you for this, or is like, what do you need to be able to work in a music library?
Yeah, I mean, my sort of experience was like my trajectory. I think everybody's going to have a very kind of different trajectory of how they sort of like got into this business, and I'll run through mine very quickly. But I sort of like, my first introduction into the world of music for media was more about writing about it. When it comes to like writing press releases and having to research what these companies do. So I'm able to be, intelligently be able to like write these, marketing materials for different companies on a freelance basis. And then I linked up with a recording studio for a touring band that I was in. I'm not going to plug the band, don't worry. And so basically we linked up with this recording studio called the Den Recorders. And there was a licensing company that was being created from there called Atrium Music, which is where I cut my teeth, as they say. And it was sort of a trial by fire situation where it was sort of like, we either need to make this work and make this happen, otherwise we were screwed. So sort of learning as you go. I feel like that's sort of the best way to do it, is you just have to like jump in and just like sort of like learn the business. I think to some extent it takes a little bit of obsession. If you actually care about being in the side of the business, like you sort of obsessively want to like learn who the people are in the industry and like what they're working on, and you sort of get sucked into that world. And I think that it's a healthy obsession that sort of breeds success to some extent as well. And listening to what Robyn was talking about too, from a hiring strategy standpoint, that's sort of one of the things that I feel like we look at a lot when we're trying to onboard people, at the music library level too, is like, does this person really want to do this? Does this person actually want to be involved in the world of music for media? Or is this a stepping stone to something else? Which, by the way, it often is. I think it's a great strategy to get to know people, work in a sort of client-facing role, get to know who the players are and things like that. Nobody expects anyone to be at a job forever, right when they're getting into the industry. But I do think that a healthy amount of obsession with what we do here is important in breeding success, ultimately.
And on that, what's your favorite part of the job?
For me, I love working on the artist side. I think that like for me personally, the fact that we're able to, be pitching catalogs and pitching people's music and to be able to contribute in a small way to the success of an artist, which is, we all know is very, very difficult to make a living out of. I find that to be extremely rewarding. I love hearing our music when on TV shows. And I love, knowing that as a company, we had a small part to do with that, and, are able to help elevate that content and be a resource for our clients. And I think one of the things that I didn't expect going into the industry was how, and nobody actually really, we don't talk enough about making adult friends. Like making friends as an adult is like it's a weird concept, I feel like. Because it's like, how do we do that? We already have our friends. How do we make new ones at this age? And I do feel like to some extent, I didn't expect that I would make so many actual genuine friendships along the way with like clients turn friends, and like we hang out socially, and it's sort of like this network that kind of at its genesis is sort of like creatively business associated, but you actually forge real relationships and real friendships with people that sort of transcend that. And I found that to be sort of a happy mistake, not a happy
bonus.
Mistake. That can't be the
icing on top.
Yeah, the icing on top. Yes.
It's very true. Anecdotally, I remember when I was starting out and my roommate was trying to get into film, and we would go to like film events and no one would talk to us. And then we would go to like music events and people were so friendly. She was like, I'm in the wrong industry. Can we bring up Allegra? Allegra works at BMG Music Publishing and does clearance. So Allegra, tell us about what that means.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Thanks, Lindsay, for having me. So clearance, what does that mean? So Tarik kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'll tell you a little bit more about the day-to-day and how I got into it as well. But essentially the role of a clearance person is, if a pitching person is pitching, then the clearance person is catching. So what I'm doing most of the day is receiving requests for film, TV, trailers, and promos. For example, Lindsay might send me a request that indicates the song she wants to use, the film or TV series or whatever the project is, maybe some information about the budget, a scene description, and the usage timing, the media needed, territory, and term, and then it's the clearance person's role to clear that with the manager, artist, or writer, whoever it is, and quote a fee back to Lindsay for the use in that project. So it's a lot of fielding a very high volume of requests, as you might imagine, knowing the value of music, knowing the value of a particular project, or being able to say, okay, Lindsay's told me this is her budget, so I think based on this artist and what I know about this artist or songwriter, what their sync history is, being able to attribute a fee to that and being able to convey that to back to the artist and or manager and say, hey, this is what the project is. Are you interested in having your music used for this project? Are you on board with the fee that's being offered or the fee that we think is appropriate? And then going back to Lindsay and conveying that to her and having a conversation about it. So it's about toggling between a lot of different levels of priority in terms of turnaround time, priorities in terms of maybe it's an artist that doesn't get a lot of syncs and you really want to prioritize that because they need syncs, or it's a high priority because it's a high dollar deal. You know, it's a big songwriter, it's a big song or big artist, it's a big usage, so you prioritize it based on that. So it's toggling between different levels of priority, and everything everyone sends you is considered urgent. So how do you prioritize that as a clearance person and determine what's truly urgent? And from that point, after the quote has been issued, Lindsay might say, hey, this is too high of a quote. Can you come down? Or she'll say, this is great. This is confirmed. And we would confirm the sync from that point. But there's so much in between in that process that can take place. Maybe the song, it's not clear from what Lindsay sends me. I can't find the song in our system for whatever reason. If it's a brand new song, it's possible that it hasn't been delivered by our A&R team just yet. So I have to go figure out what the splits are. Or maybe it's in our system, but it's an old copyright and some of the rights have reverted and I can't tell what we should claim. So sometimes there's a conversation or internal conversations that take place to determine what we can claim. And then especially if you have really big songwriters or artists or others that are, very particular, there's often a major exchange in terms of determining an appropriate fee, or they may not want to have their music licensed for that particular scene, or maybe it's a contentious use. So it's really trying to convey how the use or what the use is, and also making sure that we're always representing the artist. If it's an artist that doesn't want to have their song synced for that, then it is what it is. But, obviously our aim is to have the music licensed if it's something that our artist wants to be a part of, but it's working closely with the artist and their representative to license their music in the way that they want it licensed, if at all possible. So that's basically the day-to-day.
So I feel like, what skills do you need to have to be a clearance person?
So this has been touched on a few times, but I would say definitely attention to detail is super important. And the ability, as I said earlier, to prioritize typically a very high volume and varying levels of priority. But attention to detail is super important because you're dealing with publishing splits, you're dealing with a lot of minutia, like splits and fees, and it's kind of a nuts and bolts sort of job that's combined with creative, which is one thing I really love about it, is that it's dealing with obviously intellectual property and film, TV, and music. It's the arts, but it's kind of more of the nuts and bolts side of things. So you need someone who has a really strong attention to detail for that sort of thing. And also understanding the value of music and the value of these projects that we're working on. So we definitely want someone who has an interest, and Robyn said this earlier, has an interest in the sync world and has an interest in music, because to me, I think someone's going to do really good work if they can take pride in the work that they're doing, being able to watch a TV series or watch a film and see the work that they've put into that and take pride in that because they love music and because they love film and TV or a video game or whatever it is. So an interest in media is really important, and understanding the value of that, because that helps as a clearance person and as a negotiator. It helps you, if you have a knowledge of music, you can say, oh, I grew up listening to this, or, this was my favorite artist, or my parents' favorite artist. I have a connection to that, so I can understand and appreciate that value. And I want to fight on behalf of my writer or artist to make this happen and get this done. So that's really important as well. And really just, being a team player and being able to get your hands dirty and start in a position that maybe it's not ultimately what you want to do. Maybe you start off doing data entry, for a licensing department or for, a major label or major publisher, but ultimately you want to be, negotiating for advertising or film and TV, but you have to start somewhere. That's how I started, at Bug Music, was doing data entry for smaller projects. And eventually it led to taking on my own clients and whatnot. So I think it's really just not having too much pride to take any job in the field you want to be in and realizing how much you can really learn from that. I know how much I learned in my first roles in this industry, and it's skills that I still use to this day. So, even if it's getting coffee for an executive, there's always something you can learn. If you can sit and have a conversation with someone, then you can learn something, and don't ever take what you learned for granted. So I think just having that growth mindset is super important in this industry. And I would rather have someone come in and ask really good questions and just be a sponge for that knowledge than someone to come in and pretend like they know everything and like not have it right. So I think rather than having a fixed mindset that I already know this, or this is not where I want to be, I'm ultimately trying to get here, be present and be where you are, and be a sponge, ask really good questions, because you're going to learn so much and you're going to use it for the rest of your career if it's really the career you want to be in.
Awesome. Now, I feel like sometimes clearance is like, oh, that's like the boring paperwork stuff. And first of all, I really appreciate Allegra in that she's thinking about both the project and supervisor's needs and her client's needs. Obviously, the client is the ultimate, but the fact that she can take into consideration a project's budget and stuff like that. But tell us about what you love about your job.
Yeah,
I feel like people don't hear enough about what you love about clearance.
No, they don't. And I, like many people on this call, probably got into this industry thinking I wanted to be a music supervisor. I heard at a young age what a music supervisor was. And I'm like, well, that sounds great, because I love music and I love film and TV and media. And I love that relationship between the two. So that's what I want to do. That sounds good. And I ended up kind of like, Tarik talked about this too. I grew up in LA, but with no connections to the industry. I didn't get a music industry degree or anything, but out of college, started looking for jobs that pretty much had music in the title. Anything that had music, I was like, oh, maybe I'll go apply for this, and worked at some record stores and college radio, same thing. And ended up working my first job at a really small music publisher called Don Williams Music Group, where I did mechanical and sync licensing. I started with mechanical licensing and then moved over to sync licensing. And then from there, ended up getting a job as a temp at Bug Music after a couple years at Don Williams. And I realized very quickly that I really loved this side of it. And as much as I got into this thinking, I want to be a music supervisor because I love watching movies and watching TV shows and hearing how music is used, because I've always been a huge music fan, I still feel like I am a part of that on this side of things. And I really enjoy being firstly on the music side and advocating on behalf of artists and songwriters. And it's just really rewarding and fun for me. And to me, I still, even if I haven't creatively pitched something, Lindsay, anyone on this call that's in clearance knows when you have to wrangle in a deal, it's deal making, it's not just like passing paper. There are aspects of the job that are passing paper. Certain types of requests are a little bit more turnkey, but some of them are not. Some of them are really like, you have to dig your heels in and try to make something happen. And it's incredibly rewarding. It really is to bring that in and be able to see it come to fruition. And as Lindsay said, the clearance person is acting on behalf of the songwriter or artist first and foremost, but you are that middle person. Lindsay is also my client. So it's that middle ground of trying to make this happen for both sides and trying to make everyone happy, really, which is something I guess I like to do. Maybe I'm a people pleaser, but it's a fun part of it, is to make both sides happy and see a really great sync come to fruition after a lot of hard work. So it's not just paper pushing. I think if you're someone who really loves the arts and has an appreciation for that, but maybe you have a good attention to detail and you really like, communicate. I think also being a great communicator is super important. You have to be able to convey to a manager or artist what this is. I have to convey back to Lindsay, this is why this isn't going to work. This is why the fee is too low, or maybe the use is too contentious. So if you're someone who's a good communicator and likes to use those skills and likes to negotiate, this is the job for you, and you will get a lot out of it, even though it's not creative, quote unquote. You're still helping in the creative process. It's great. It's really fun.
Awesome. Can we pull up Danny Exum to talk about music supervision for trailers? And just like hopping off of Allegra, Danny, do you do clearance in your job? Or is it
do I do clearance?
Yeah.
A tiny bit, mostly not. Mostly we're sending things to the studio and they're dealing with that. So hi, everybody. My name is Danny Exum. I'm the director of music at a trailer company called Workshop Creative. I've been doing that I've been a music supervisor for like 15 years or something that's too long when you think about it. And I've been doing trailers most of that time. Probably 12 of those years I've been doing trailers. I started out being, I came to LA out of college and be a recording engineer. And I just then realized I didn't want to deal with bands in a studio situation. And so I thought, like, how could I work with music still, but, and I was doing some people's student films and things. And so music supervision seemed like that's a real job. Like I couldn't believe it. And came to LA and I mentioned this earlier, I don't really mean it, but like I came out and was like annoyed anybody I could find, you know what I mean? Like who do I know that's a music supervisor? At that point, there was nobody. It was like 2005 or something. And, I don't know, I could find Alex Patsavis or whatever. I could find these people. And so I did that and then got a gig as an assistant pitching music. And, I think for anybody that wants to be a music supervisor and that is trying to get in somewhere, I would say like get your feet in the door somewhere. Pitching for me was great because at that point I was able to meet all the music supervisors, and I was able to understand what they're working on and what it really means to be a music supervisor and, pitching music. And so I really developed a relationship with music and media that way. And that was sort of the start of my journey. So I would say, I know that a lot of people are like, I want to be a music supervisor and that's all I want to do. And you have sort of blinders on and that's fine. But there are other things out there that I would definitely check out. So trailers, everybody knows what trailers are. When I got into trailers, like I didn't even realize there was a thing or there was a company that made trailers, let alone there was a company that there was a music position within that company, So, we obviously are at sort of a nexus of art and commerce in trailers. So we're trying to make the best creative thing we can. And now everybody watches trailers online and they're like a big thing now. We want to make them obviously as cool as possible. And we want to make those as strong as possible. But we also are trying to sell something, so, there's a lot of, I'm sure somebody like has had this happen to them when you go to the mall, I guess pre-COVID, nobody's going to the mall anymore, but when you go to the mall and somebody's like, hey, come watch this movie or come watch these trailers. And, they have a little thing, you fill it out. That's all the testing. And so we get all that information back and then make some decisions based on that. So, it really is selling them as we can. And my job, I'm the head of music, so I'm in charge of, finding the music and finding, doing the creative, doing all kinds of stuff. I have a couple people that work for me. And so that makes it a lot easier. It's a fantastic job and I really love it. And I think it's sort of, how does it work? How are trailers, because it seems like, you just have a song and you want to put it in a thing, but it's like I said, there's a lot of, we're trying to sell things.
What are some qualities that are good to have in your position?
Some qualities that are good to have. I think everybody has mentioned this, but attention to detail is very key, especially when we're dealing with cue sheets and things like that, because if things get reported wrong, then that just causes a whole cascade of problems that nobody wants to deal with. So, attention to detail would be number one. Number two, I would say that, you have to be able to sit in an uncomfortable space, and not a physically uncomfortable space, but in an area where you're like, because when we're doing music searches, like we just get bombarded, and clients, the first thing that they change is music. So we're always changing music on our spots, and we're doing, 50 versions, 60 versions of things. And so lots of things get in and out. And it can be, you can get to a point where you feel like, I can't do it anymore. There's no other songs, and that's just not a possibility, because if we do that, then we lose, and nobody wants to lose. Because trailers, I should say this, trailers, we compete against other trailer houses, right? So like, my trailer shop is working on a movie, and then another one across town is working on a movie. We're doing the same thing, and we're trying to beat them with our music or with our cut or whatever. And so, there is a sense of competition that like we don't want to give up, because then we don't get our trailer, right? And, that's sort of inevitable sometimes. I think Robyn said this earlier, like it's a miracle, when you get the thing past the finish line. So you celebrate those miracles, obviously, but you have to be able to sit in a foxhole with somebody and just take those incoming rounds and sit there and pitch and think creatively and just be able to be uncomfortable and be able to also at the end of the day say, I did what I could do. I did my best, and maybe we lose. And you have to be okay with that too, right? Like you have to be okay with, we're not going to win this every time, but but that's not the important part, right? The important part is, how do we approach the aspect of putting music in this thing and making the coolest thing that we can make? Now, whether or not that goes forward and the public sees it, that's a different thing. But we have control over the thing that we can make. And so I think somebody that's able to see that and to sort of go with the flow a little bit and not get too frustrated. You're going to get a little frustrated, but not get too frustrated with that process, I think is a very, very handy thing to bring to the table.
Very cool. And just because you're kind of talking about it, I saw a question pop up about how, trailers are often being worked on before the film, right? So before a composer for the film has even created anything. Do you ever get to work with the film's real composer?
Sometimes like we did, a lot of times that happens with movies that are musically based. So the last time that happened for me was Rocket Man. So we were working with the composer on that, because there's a lot of, obviously that's all Elton John's music redone, and Giles Martin did. And so we're him trying to figure out, even just getting, because we, a lot of times in trailers, we do custom work, and to do custom work to that stuff, to a piece of score from the feature or something, obviously we have to bring in that composer. But, most of the time, I would say an outlier, honestly, like it's pretty separate. Once we get a film in and that we're getting dailies in and there's nothing, they haven't put anything together editorially yet. So we're just getting dailies, and then our assistant editors will put together from the script, we'll put together a string out of like, this is how the story goes in the script. It's obviously not going to be the final version, but gives us a way to put something on its feet that we don't have. All the way to everything is shot, the music is done, everything is done. Here's the movie. We can't sell it. Help us, So we get that too, and everything in the middle. Animation takes so much time, but we'll get a pencil drawing of it, create a trailer, and then that goes away for like a year, while they animate the things in our trailer that we chose that we're using. They put that in front of the animation of the rest of the film, so that we can then obviously put the trailer out before the movie. So it definitely, it depends, but generally, yeah, we're working on things as they're shooting or as they're putting together different versions of the feature. So we're getting, 3 or 4 different cuts of the movie, once they change things, and so we'll get it then. So, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. Can we bring up Lila to talk about music supervision for ads?
No, I'm having fun watching the comments. There's a lot of fans. So advertising, I've worked in both the traditional sense of broadcast advertising, where it'd be the typical Mad Men, J. Walter Thompson, and that. And I was a broadcast producer actually at McGarry. I didn't work in the music department, but I worked with, and then now I'm freelance. I've actually been freelance since 2011. So my job, what I do is try to keep clients and try to make sure they're happy. And so usually in advertising, what happens is a lot of the time, unfortunately, we're not on the front end and we are cleaning up messes. And I would say that happens more in the traditional places, because you're dealing not only with your creative and your campaign, but then you're dealing with the client, and you have different degrees of approvals and taste and ideas of what a product should convey. Now I'm pretty lucky. I mean, I'm now more leaning toward, I have more fashion clients these days, and film. So, and VR actually too. So with fashion, they're a little bit different, and actually I enjoy working with them. It's a bit more creative in the sense where they're ahead of the game most of the time, and they have to be. So they tend to challenge me a lot on keeping up or being ahead, or finding what they need. And I would say a lot of this job across the board, no matter what, as a music supervisor, is actually getting your directors, your creatives, your editors what they need, not what you want. So that is a big, I'm going to debunk the glorification of music supervision of that. We pick all the music and we're the ones, and we know we're the end all, and we're not. But there's some greatness to that, because I mean, I've gotten things where I was sitting in the middle of PEI during a convention, and actually Michael Kors came to me, and they found a soul singer in Louisiana, and they wanted his track, and I had to go find him. And they didn't know where he was. They just found his track. So here I am searching everything while I'm at this convention and going through and everything, and hitting him up on Facebook and whatnot. So to me, that's part of the fun, to find that person. I had to do a punk period piece, and I found the lead singer running his own dojo in England, and he was shocked out of his mind that I found him and that we were using his music. So the process is usually, you get picture, because you are on the back end. If you're on the front end, that's where there's more thought process in it, or it's going to be sung on camera or something like that. There's a reason usually that the front end gets to you. If not, you're on the back end. There's usually a reference track or whatnot. And I trust all the people, a lot of these people that just spoke about pitching and being at BMG and being at individual sync places. And I mean, most of us here own our own businesses, which just means you're trying to survive most of the time and getting work and making your artists happy, because your artists come knocking. And it's basically, usually I get something, I have to know the media, and you have to keep up with the media. That's a big thing. It changes all the time, especially, TikTok is an example of that. And then you gotta turn it around to your trustworthy people. And it's not always, I can't always ask for a one stop, Sometimes I have some same day clearances, and usually those come to me where I have to clear the song that's on there because it's already out, and that sucks, but it happens and it's part of the story. But when I do have time, I put a brief together and I send it out to trusted people and folks, and they come back to me with what they have in their catalog, and that's actually where I listen to music most of the time. And I'll listen to every single track that's given to me. And I have a good recall, kind of a DJ head. So I actually keep everything, and then I'll take, sometimes it's 400 songs I'll go through, and I'll cull them down to 20, 25 selects, and I'll give that to the creative team. And from there, they'll pick what they want. In film, I find they want less. I'll give them 4 or 5 selects. And it's a little bit more, film kind of trusts you a little bit more in that respect. And I think advertising needs more options because just the way of all the personalities you're dealing with. And then you go and clear it.
It's also ads is like, you got 30 seconds and you got to say something, like it's very specific.
And it's funny because sometimes you're like, yeah, I need something, and it's a model and they're happy on the boardwalk and everything. And somebody sends you a song about being broken up, or, screw somebody. I'm going to watch my language because I heard we have youngies. And it's just like, did you hear what you just sent me? Because does it really reflect what's going on? But, it's part of it. And I know that everybody is working at top speed as well. And that's where I have to appreciate and be, and I protect all my people. I talk to my clients. My clients are just as important as the people who are giving me music. And I've been on that side as well. And so I'm usually quite polite and personal and answer all my emails, and really try to, because honestly, to pitch in this business is probably one of the hardest things I think to do. So you're a salesperson, and nobody likes to be in sales, but it is about relationships in the end.
What kind of experience do you need to be a music supervisor for ads? Like, do you have to come at it from a marketing background? Do you have to know anything about marketing, or can you just know music?
No, so I came at it a whole different thing. I didn't even know, I'm from LA originally. I didn't even know if I was going to get to college. So I played softball and was hoping for a scholarship. And I happened to get one to New York and was like, woohoo. Went to St. John's University. So shout out to Hollis and all that. And I mean, my mom was from Mexico, and she was illiterate. And she was just like, you be professional, you make money. And my dad was from here, but he's like, do whatever you want. And he was a pool man. So I kind of surpassed his ideas and understanding of what school and what that further education was. He got the GI Bill in Vietnam. So he didn't really have a proper lineage to tell me what to do. My mom trusted him. So go to softball, studied history, psychology, went, oh crap, I'm not going to make money, or what am I going to do? Psychology is 8 years more. And I loved history, and then was like, oh, I'll go to law school and make money, get out 3 years and make money. I went to law school and went toward human rights and immigration, nonprofit, found out that you don't make money. I worked over at the UN. And the thing is, when you go to law school, you do not specialize in anything. It's the work that you do that you specialize. You just graduate as a lawyer, period. And they actually don't want you to specialize. And so I got out very cynical, and with a school loan, saying, okay, if I'm stuck here, why don't I do what I want? And I actually opened up a bar on credit card money. So I opened up this venue in Williamsburg, and that put me into the music world. And you don't open up anything on credit card money, so you need a job. And I then went to, there's a couple of us who got jobs off of Craigslist, and that's what happened. I answered this vague thing in Craigslist, and I was like, okay, I work in music. And at the time when I opened my venue, it was Daptone. Sharon Jones was too big already, but I had, like Budo's guys around, but I had Antibalas, a Daptone, like all these artists that were understanding what their rights were and starting to own it. And they also worked at my place. So I learned from them what was important to them. So in this job listing, it's like, music. And I was like, okay. So I went for it and I got it, and it was for a music house. And that's kind of where I started learning the process and the the production, and I kind of did A&R. I pulled in bands, and I guess it would be one stops, right? Because I had more people coming to me, and my employees that were all owning and doing music and everything. And from the venue, I learned that I had an ear for live sound. And the thing is that besides all that schooling, I always had music in my background. It was just kind of not allowed. And that's kind of something that we have to look at, because when we say we want to diversify this field, part of the problem is when you're small and you're young and you're not in that dialogue, you don't know it's there. So I worked at this studio, and it's Avatar Studio, so it's this former power station, legendary. And I got to meet Ron Carter, Nile Rodgers. I mean, it was insane. And to be around these people and just watch them. And to figure out what's important. So I learned that process. Ended up when I sold the bar, or decided to sell the bar, I went into the agency, and that's when I accidentally landed in the agency because they were pitching a job during Christmas and nobody wanted to work. So I was the one that came into work. We won the pitch, we won the business, they kept me on. And then I went freelance, and 2 years later, and really with freelance, it's kind of just, where can you get work, and where can I do it? And a lot of it, so what I've taken on is my relationships, what we've discussed, my artists. I mean, the people that worked for me are still giving me music. And I mean, I had Colin Stenson, if people know him as a composer, Hereditary. He was on that. Vinky Griptite worked for me. All the Radio 4 guys worked for me. A lot of guys from Antibalas, the Killers. I mean, it's amazing what I was blessed with and who walked into my place. So those relationships are what became my arsenal to be able to talk the game, explain it, because music is subjective, and it doesn't matter, if somebody says funk, you got to figure out how old they are, where they're coming from, what part of the country they're coming from, what part of the world they're coming from, and then know what they really want. And that's kind of what's interesting about what we do. And I think that's why it's when they say, oh, did you pick it? And it's like, no, we're trying to figure out what somebody wants, and that is a big part of our job. And it is creative, but it's a lot of working with egos and sorting that out too. So I would say, yeah, people are, oh, you're a lawyer, that helped you. And the one thing that helped me, I think, out of law school was probably learning more understanding production, but it's probably mediation more than anything. And that was a class that I took extra. It wasn't even part of school. And it's basically how you get to yes on all different levels, because everybody has a yes, and it's how to make people happy. And I think that's a big part of this game, is being patient and knowing how to answer people. And
I feel like that's a panel, how to get to yes. Like,
it is a book too. I know. It was so sad because I was so happy when I took the class, and at the end, because you certified in a way, and they're like, don't quit your day job. Nobody wants to mediate. They want to sue. And I was like, or they want to litigate. I was like, oh dear. But I was human rights and immigration. I was doing asylum cases. I was helping people who were trying to leave their country because they were going to get killed back home. God, so it's like, I wasn't negotiating anything, but I guess a life, but with a judge and the law. So to say you need law school, that's not valid. But I would say that you need, it's a lot of business. It's not just knowing music, but knowing music is also the large proponent of it as well. So.
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring up our last panelist, Maya Halfon Cordova, who works at Microsoft. So Maya, tell us about Microsoft and music supervision for games and everything that you do over there.
Sure. Hi, Halfon Cordova. So I'm at Microsoft, which also owns Xbox. So I work on Xbox first-party games and game trailers. I've been there for about 10 years. Where should I start, I guess? Do you want to know how I got there? Maybe I'll tell you how I got there.
Yeah, tell us how you got there.
I actually know a lot of you from back when I was a little baby music person. I started off at a record label called Quango that was run by a family friend of mine. And I started off in marketing, and there was a person doing sync pitching, and she was new, and she kept asking me, she would send me the briefs because I knew her catalog really well. and I would give suggestions. They were pretty okay. And she left to go become a music supervisor. And my boss was like, "You're just going to do this." And I was like, "I don't know how to do any of this. Like, I don't know the lingo." I didn't know what anything was. And I just did it. And I just started pitching music, and I loved it. I had always been interested in soundtracks. I did everything music that I could in college. I did, I had a radio show. I interned. I had a job also. I went to UCLA. I had a job at Royce Hall as an usher. I interned with them. I did, when I studied abroad, I had a radio show in the UK at my college. I did an internship at a record label in Manchester. I just did whatever I could. So after Quango, I got a job as a music supervisor for someone named Michael Welsh. And that was so great because I did a ton of clearance. We cleared just like a lot of branded stuff. So it was like Chivas Regal is doing a concert with the Black Eyed Peas in Japan, but it's broadcasting in all of Asia. And let me tell you, that is, a lot of paperwork. And then after that, I went to New York to work for Domino Records and Publishing, and I was their sole pitch person at the time. Now they're much larger. And I also did a lot of paperwork alongside our business affairs. What's funny is while I was there, they said, "Hey, we're going to add on another Synch person. So why don't you think about how you would like the departments to be split up? And obviously, you've been here longer. You should, you can kind of pick which medias you'd like to keep." And I thought about it a lot, and I spoke about it with a friend of mine. And I was like, I think I'd rather keep ads, trailers, and video games. I think that eventually I would love to, music supervise in one of those areas. I had always been really interested. I really like, pitching for all of those, but I especially like licensing for apps because I thought it was really interesting. My friend was looking for a job, and she sent me a LinkedIn posting to a job at Xbox. And I was like, well, I definitely do not want to live in Seattle. I love Domino. And I was like, but you know what? If Microsoft calls me, I'll pick up the phone. So I applied, and then they called me, and it turned out that the person who ended up hiring me was someone that I met back at Quango. So, those connections that you make and keep, never be a jerk to anyone. Not that I would have been a jerk because I was like a baby and he was like a grown up at the time, but, just always kind of keep your people and check in. And he remembered me. So that definitely helped. And now I've been there for 10 years. So let me see. What my job entails is working on games. So I think maybe the one difference that games have to maybe some of the projects that other folks here work on is the gestation period is incredibly long. I had a baby and did my entire maternity leave over the course of a game that we are still not done working on. In that span, there's a ton of iteration. So I would say it's really helpful to not get discouraged. And, sometimes it's helpful to pitch things twice. I would say the hardest thing about my job is that, I do work in the games organization, but I essentially have a job at not a music company. And even though Xbox is an entertainment organization, there's a lot of structure and kind of top-down stuff that comes to me that is very techy. Silicon Valley, that show, a lot of it is like how my office life used to be. So I would say that that's challenging. There's a lot of education. Even I work with individual game developers a lot. So sometimes they're, new, Microsoft just brought them in, or they're very siloed. And so kind of trying to explain the music licensing process to them, which is incredibly nuanced, can be really challenging. Not challenge. I mean, I think it is a challenge to rise to. So I think that's definitely something that is a harder part of my job. Let's see, what do I love about it? I do love the wins, bands that a song that I've been hoarding for a couple of years and being able to place it. I also just really love how much I get to use my imagination. So often we're trying to create a sense of time and place, and most of the scenarios that I work in are fantastical. You're creating, what is the future? What does music sound like in a future when the planet's been destroyed and this has happened? And or how do we use music to create a sense of, maybe it takes place in the past, but it's not actually the real past. It's a past looking at it with a different lens, or an alternate past. And so I think getting to think about that, and maybe, deciding, hey, maybe an artist should cover this song to sort of create this atmosphere is really cool. So that never ceases to kind of excite and amaze me.
I was going to say, do you find yourself licensing a lot, or hiring composers to write for your projects or write specific original songs?
So that's a great question. Video games in general tend to be mostly score. And what's interesting about my job is it's sort of carved out in that I tend to work with commercially available recording artists. So it's either I work with artists who either are available for, we license a ton of songs. I mean, I work on the Forza Horizon franchise, which takes place at a music festival, but over 100 songs in each iteration. And I do a lot of trailers, a lot of downloadable content, trailers for downloadable content. But then, increasingly there's more of an appetite to do things that are premium, a little more unique. So maybe having an artist compose an original song, or an artist compose, and we've had kind of some artists compose original pieces of music. So kind of that gray area between score and commercial music, which I think is awesome. And I hope to do more of it. But, occasionally we will be brought in to recommend composers, just because I think that sometimes that world can get a little homogenous, and it's always helpful to have kind of people thinking about it with a different lens. Someone's asking, do indie artists have a chance of scoring? I think that's a great question. And I think it depends on what. Scoring a big game? No, because not indie, but game. We were just talking about this today, actually, on a project I'm working on, and they want quite a large composer. And initially we had, my colleague and I were discussing what other options we could put forward if this composer couldn't work out. And, in talking to the audio, the audio lead, we realized the scope is so big, and the needs, it's technical, right? You have to deliver modular music. It's got to be loopable. There's kind of some technical requirements, and then you also needed to deliver cinematics. And there's a lot of, it's sort of like saying, does an indie artist have a chance of scoring a huge blockbuster film? And it's like, eventually, potentially, or maybe if they work under another composer. But I would say, and we always try and put forward, a range of artists, especially if it's for just, a certain piece of the game, not an entire game. But those opportunities they're somewhat rare. So it's not a no, but it's like a maybe, just don't count on it.
Are there any specific skills or traits that are helpful in music for video games?
Yeah, I think that curiosity is actually really great, because you kind of never know what sort of music you'll be needing, from music from different countries, different territories. And even, sometimes people are like, oh, I want ancient instrument, music made on ancient instruments. And you're like, okay, great. I knew who had that, and so, obviously there's ways to kind of educate yourself quickly, but it's also good to know a lot of different kinds of people. And I'm actually always really interested to hear from people who have really niche catalogs, because there is a point, that I will need that. And then I think the other thing, everyone said attention to detail. I think patience is really huge. And also just not really an appetite, but an ability to handle tedium. I think that any creative project, I worked at record labels, and I've seen the struggle that artists go through to finish their records. And the truth is, the beginning of anything creative is fun. The end of anything creative sucks. And so if this creative thing is, 2 years in the making, there's just going to be all those things that you're like, oh, we'll deal with that later. Well, they all come up. There's a milestone in a game called 0 bug bounce, where you have to, every single mistake or error is flagged as a bug, and there could be thousands of them. So it's like, and that could be, you know, is an artist name misspelled on a credit? You know, it could be anything, or like, oh, this isn't right. You know, like there's just so many things that can go wrong, and the greater the amount of music that you have, the more that there is, you know, you need to make sure all your paperwork is signed. Or I just spent the last few weeks reviewing lyrics for Forza Horizon 5, because our game is rated E for everyone, and ESRB ratings are much more stringent than radio ratings. And it's like, you know, I mean, we did hire someone to do that, but you need to kind of take that on and make sure that it's all done right. So I didn't listen to any music those weeks aside from those songs. But, you know, so it's not all the fun part. You have to really be okay with the tedium and the process.
All right. Well, we've got a ton of questions, and I don't think we're going to be able to hit all of them. But I think a big one that I've seen kind of twice, 2 different versions of, and I was going to ask anyway, is how do you get an entry-level position? And one person asked, how do you get an entry-level position coming from a totally different background? And another person said, how can you do so, search out jobs proactively rather than just reacting to a posting on a job board? And Maya, do you have any advice on this?
I mean, I think it's really great to, you know, I think not everybody has the same path to getting into jobs, right? I think that you really need to be willing to not just do the job that is like your ultimate end goal. Like I found that working in pitching, I got to know all the music supervisors, and it really helps you understand that whole process. You know, I guess it's kind of like if you were to become a baker, like it might help to get a job at a flour mill for a while. I think that kind of stuff is really useful, and just kind of getting to know everybody. So I would say be open-minded.
I think to some extent also if I were to do it over again, and I took I feel like more of a traditional strategic route of getting into the industry, I think I would be seeking out organizations that help represent our industry, like the Guild of Music Supervisors, Women in Music, like the California Copyright Conference, the Independent Music Publishers Association, and finding out what kind of volunteer opportunities there are, so you could just start meeting people within the organization and just forging relationships, because that's ultimately what's going to launch you into whatever your entry level role is. You're going to be able to prove your value and to be able to, meet people. So that'd be my advice.
If I knew more earlier, I would probably go more into film and consider a production job over, sometimes I think of art direction, because your only problem is that you have to return something. But with myself too, I think that working under someone who's doing this successfully was really the route, how it was. You had your certain kings in this game, and now we have so much work out there in so many places, but a lot of it is treated very corporately. And if you want to work corporately, it's moving up and moving under. The only unfortunate thing is it's very hard to work under an internship not being paid, and especially at the cost of living these days. So there's some hard elements of that, but I know I wouldn't give back my bar for anything, because I met whoever my friends are, is who I work with. And that's the only time I have for my friends are who I work with. But I'm just very lucky that they're awesome. But I would suggest to people, don't put your eggs in one basket, but I would look at a bigger picture of the role and see how you fit in and how you can get in maybe under someone or with someone, because it does help.
Yeah, I would echo all of those sentiments. It really is all about relationships. And, I've hired people interviewed people, maybe not hired them, but also hired them based on recommendations of trusted clients and colleagues and it was maybe a situation where that person didn't even work under that client, but like that client came to me and said, hey, I interviewed this person. They're really smart. They don't have a lot of experience, but they interviewed really well. You should consider them. I've had that happen a lot. So I think, all of these organizations and tools and resources are at your disposal, and definitely networking is huge, getting to know people. And Lila's advice, I think, is great, just to expound upon that getting to know a specific organization that you kind of like nerd out about and get to know, how you might fit into that. And because being able to speak to that in an interview, why you want to work at a specific organization is really attractive. And getting to know, who you might want to work for there and how can you get in with that person.
And I would add, for anybody who wants to get into the industry, use technology. Like a lot of the stuff that exists now didn't exist back then. I'm dating myself, but LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, none of that stuff existed when I got in the music industry. And it wasn't so known and out there where you can literally on your phone look up who the music supervisor is for a TV show, or look up, who did the clearance and what a clearance company is. All of these things are out there. You can, DM people on Instagram and Twitter and all of those things. So I would take advantage of that, but be respectful and, understand that you're not going to get a response from everybody, but just that, having that as an opportunity is a huge advantage from people who got in the industry 10, 15, 25 years ago. Is you literally have these people at your fingertips on your phone. So study up, be respectful, check out different groups and figure out where you may want to be, and just, politely introduce yourself to some people. You'd be surprised how open a lot of people in the industry are to somebody who just has some questions and is coming to them with something. So use technology to your advantage.
Also, if there's any opportunity that you can seize for any sort of like mentorship, and people's time is very valuable. But I have found that, I would just, if there's something that you want, you're going to have to ask for it for sure. But I've definitely found that, people have asked me before, like, oh, like, can you talk to this person? They're getting out of college. They're trying to figure out what their next steps are. And, like, I've been able to sit down with people like that, give them sort of a rundown, very similar to this right now, of like what we do and kind of what the different pathways are into the industry, what kind of different entry level jobs there are, and things like that. But in doing that, it's also forging a relationship with those people as well. So, you feel a little bit more invested in people that you are like mentoring, and like, maybe there's more of an opportunity to, you might want to like fight to help, forge some opportunities for those people. So if there is somebody that you really look up to, who's like a music supervisor or somebody in the world of publishing, then maybe it's worth like reaching out to them and saying like, I know your time is valuable. Would you have 10 minutes for us to connect so I can pick your brain? I'm getting out of college or X, Y, and Z, and I want to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you. Someone also asked, is there anything you do to keep your respective skills sharp? I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question.
For me, I would say on my side, and I think probably on everybody's side, I try to stay up on what's current trends, whether it's music, movies, TV shows, film, and a lot of times I have to just step outside of my comfort zone. Like, I think all of us can fall into a thing where we just listen to music from one period in our life, and you can't really do that in any of these jobs. You have to expand your palette and be willing to listen to an artist from a genre that you don't particularly care for. You have to watch a movie or a TV show that you don't like. For example, I don't like musicals, but getting into this job in the late 90s, early 2000s, I had to make myself aware of musicals and watch musicals, and because I had to do a clearance on a musical, and it was like really intense. And then for me, in the process of clearing that music, it made me have a better appreciation for it. And I think that works all across the board. Like, you might hear a new song and go, oh God, that sucks. But I try to figure out why are people gravitating towards that song? What is it about it? Is it the hook? Is it the vibe? Is it the part of the world that that person might be in? You know, K-pop is huge right now. Why is K-pop huge? You know, why is down south hip hop really popular right now? Instead of looking down on it, I always try to figure out what is it about that music that makes people really gravitate towards it. Like, these numbers aren't all manufactured. If 10, 15 million people are really into a song, there's something there that they are gravitating towards. And the same with film and video games and projects that might not be in your lane. I would just suggest be open to those things and always be learning. Never think that, okay, I'm done with finding like new cool songs. There's always something new and interesting. And even if it's not on the radio, it may be in film or TV or Spotify or all these different places to discover new music and new talent. So I would say make sure that you are staying fresh and staying open-minded to new things that may make you feel a little uncomfortable.
And I would add to that with media, keep up with media. And I basically, when I went into Jay Walter, we launched Bing, and that was the campaign. And I watched Jay Walter as a signatory. So what that means is that all the work should be union. It doesn't necessarily mean your musicians are union, but there's a whole SAG. SAG defines what happens. And you knowing your union rules, and that goes across film and everything and residuals and keeping up because things change. Knowing media, how it changes, it's quite, I mean, with TikTok, it's kind of funny because I'm in my gym class working out and yada, yada, yada comes on and I immediately start bouncing because it's just the worm that went into my head and it makes me laugh. I'm like, okay, watching too much TikTok. But it's learning and knowing because usually your clients know less. And you are actually explaining to them. And that actually goes with music too. And you think, oh, your producers have done 20,000 commercials or done so many films, they will still not understand what a pub and master is, or that there's sides, or that there could be 5 rights holders. You know, you can explain it to your head explodes and it will go right through there, you know, right over them. So it's kind of up to you and you're on that legal, you're there. You are the reason that somebody can get sued. And if you're not understanding what usages are going on and even helping your client, because I'll have somebody say, oh, we have all, you know, advertising. Do you actually have paid media? Do you have pre-roll? Oh, we're paying Facebook for carousel. That is not paid media. And it's not pre-roll. I had a non-union shop, did not understand how a union singer could come on and destroy the whole thing. And it's because they were SAG. And it's just that I think is something you really, it's part of the knowledge that you do have to keep up and fine tune and just, you know, the music, it's the same. And there's something that was brought up about authenticity and they get, you know, and what you know, and oh, only so-and-so should know this. No, our job is to know music, to know good music, to know who likes that music, how they like the music, why they think it's good. And then beyond that, how you're going to make it work. And that's the media part. And that's, I think that's important to keep up with. And I would say that if you can find any panel of anything, I wish there were some for producers that would teach them this game. It would be amazing because I think it would eliminate a lot of the headaches of our job.
Thank you. I'm like, I mean, for me, I also am genuinely into, I'm like, TikTok, what is that? Is it sync? Is it ads? Like, what? So we have to wrap up, but I'd see a quick question just saying, how can you get in front of somebody when you don't live in LA? I mean, my coordinator messaged me on LinkedIn like 3 years ago because she was really, or four years ago, she was really passionate about my work on The Royals, a TV show I worked on. I think passion is very powerful. You know, we've all talked about like wanting to hire people who actually want to be here. And she didn't live here. She LinkedIn me. I'm not inviting everyone to LinkedIn me. I'm not hiring, but I do agree, like these internet tools and it's harder to be trained virtually, but I think you can work remotely, especially in this line of work. But that's my opinion, at least. If anyone else has any advice?
I mean, I moved cross country twice for my jobs. So I'll just say it's helpful to be mobile, I spent 10 years in Seattle, and then during the pandemic, I requested to move back to LA, where I'm from. And, they let me, but I think part of that is because I kind of had the goodwill, that I built up. And I'm not saying that you guys should move right away, but I do think it's helpful to be open to moving where it is, because having had a music job in Seattle for 10 years, which is, it's definitely not LA. And I would go to the festivals and get to know everyone, and the community is small and it's limited. And I met with really interesting people who would ask me about jobs. And it's like, there's a couple studios, there's a radio station, there's like maybe 4 music supervisors in all of Seattle. then you're limited. So it's just kind of choosing what are your priorities? And, your priorities they're your priorities, but it's good to kind of know where work ranks in that, and how you need to engage with the music business to feel, I guess, fulfilled and or paid.
Yeah, to echo that, I would say I agree. My advice is always to people who are trying to like break into the industry is to move where the media is being created, and you're gonna have to network with people. I understand that we're in a global pandemic still, but people are starting to meet again, and as things will continue to open up eventually, like people are going to be doing things face to face. There's a lot of value in like that face to face connection. So I personally think it's really an important piece of the puzzle. And also in terms of like skills for the previous question, that I feel like you have to hone in on and continue to like kind of like to nurture for, in this role is something that we haven't talked about is self-awareness, because I feel like I've kind of come across like a lot of candidates and a lot of people within the industry where if they're not seeing the level of success that I feel like they're hoping to garner within the industry, if I were to make like a character observation, I would say like a lot of times I feel like, oh, well, that person is not very self-aware. They're not really like understanding like, the way in which they're interacting with people and how it's coming off to other people, and being like kind of empathetic to the way that they're, that their interactions are making other people feel and stuff like that. Because there's a lot of pressure within our industry. There's a lot of people reaching out to all of us for all different reasons. And I think that it's something that you have to practice. I feel like being self-aware. And if you can master that, I think it's a good thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Robyn, I realized I didn't even touch on your studio experience, but there's never enough time. So
good.
Thank you, Robyn, Tarik, Jonathan, Allegra, Danny, Lila, and Maya. You guys are awesome. So good to see you.
Thanks for everything.
All your advice.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for coming.
Bye.
See ya.
Guys, bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks all.